Store policy is openly ignored. Who actually pays the price? This entire explainer really hinges on this exact tension. We're exploring a customer's intense, almost boiling frustration when the clear black and white rules of shared public spaces completely break down in the real world. The source material we're looking at paints a picture of a consumer who feels absolutely stranded. They see rules that are literally supposed to protect their shopping experience, just being tossed right out the window. And what we want to understand today is that ripple effect. When management looks the other way, how does that impact the regular, rule-abiding customer who's just standing there in line?
Because officially, convenience stores explicitly state that animals, other than official guide dogs, are strictly prohibited. It's cut and dry. But the reality reported by our source is vastly different. Everyday pets, cats and dogs, are just being brought in freely by their owners. The author of our source text notes they've complained countless times to customer service about this. And the result? Just empty, standardized corporate responses promising to strengthen management. But on the floor, absolutely nothing changes. It's a literal textbook example of corporate policy existing entirely in a vacuum.
Let's trace exactly how this system collapses, because the author outlines a complete systemic failure here. Step 1, it begins with a legitimate customer complaint, which is then immediately met with empty corporate lip service, with the author actually calls completely perfunctory responses. But the breakdown gets really interesting on the floor. The store clerks on the ground aren't just ignoring the pets, they're actively interacting with them. They're petting them, completely validating the rule breaking, which ultimately means the rules become completely and utterly meaningless. If the enforcers of the rule are the ones rewarding the violation, the policy doesn't just fail, it actively creates friction between different types of customers.
Now, I should warn you, the author uses some highly charged and pretty derogatory language to express their frustration. We're quoting it directly from the source just to show the sheer intensity of the emotion here. Calling pet owners brain dead and pointing out that they aren't blind really highlights the author's absolute exasperation. To this customer, the guide dog only rule is just a matter of common sense and civic duty. They view the blatant disregard of this rule not just as a mild annoyance, but as a deeply selfish act. It really shows how quickly a breakdown in store policy can escalate from just a minor inconvenience to deep personal resentment toward fellow citizens.
The narrative then escalates from a general grievance to very specific, chaotic incidents. Just imagine you're trying to buy a coffee and suddenly a large dog runs behind the checkout counter, a restricted food handling area, by the way, and just starts jumping up and down. According to the source, this isn't just about following rules anymore. It becomes a severe hygiene and safety issue. The author describes the situation as disgusting and notes that it actively frightened other people in the store. We're moving from a philosophical debate about rules into a very tangible physical disruption of a retail space. The checkout counter is the heart of the store's operations, and having an animal breach that space, that is the ultimate symbol of lost control.
Now, what's genuinely fascinating about this grievance is how it extends beyond just the animal's physical presence. It shifts to the staff's complicity and the actual impact on store efficiency. The author points out that instead of doing their jobs, instead of scanning items and moving the line along, the clerks are stopping to play with the animals. Think about that universal frustration of waiting in a slow line. It's bad enough when someone is paying with a handful of loose change, right? Now compound that with the fact that the line is slow because the staff is entertaining an unauthorized animal. It's a double insult to the paying customer's time. The grievance here is fundamentally about a breach of the unwritten contract of retail. You provide prompt, efficient service to the people who are actually following the rules.
And this specific interaction perfectly captures the absurdity of the whole situation. A customer brings a large dog directly into the checkout area. The clerk, instead of saying, "Excuse me, pets aren't allowed," simply observes, "This dog is very excited today." And the owner casually replies, "Is there any dog that isn't excited?" Meanwhile, our source, the frustrated author, is standing right there in line, forced to listen to this totally banal conversation while just waiting to pay. Instead of enforcing the rules, the staff and the pet owner basically playfully excuse the disruption. They completely ignore the queue of waiting customers who are essentially held hostage by this situation. It just highlights an incredible lack of situational awareness from both the employee and the pet owner. This lack of enforcement eventually mutates into an even more frustrating issue: the loophole of privilege. According to the source, the problem isn't isolated to just one chain. They note it happens at Family Mart as well, just getting more ridiculous each time. In one instance, our author actually took it upon themselves to correct a rule-breaking customer, essentially taking on the job the clerk refused to do. The staff ignore the conflict entirely. But the kicker? The offending customer shot back that they were very close with the store manager and that the manager didn't mind.
This is a crucial pivot. It transforms the issue from a simple lack of enforcement into a systemic issue of cronyism. It's like personal relationships with local management allow certain people to bypass corporate rules entirely. Crazy, right?
And then, the author's visceral disgust reaches an absolute climax. Again, we're looking at the raw, unfiltered reaction from the source material here. The author shifts their focus from convenience stores to night markets, observing people carrying cats and dogs right next to food stalls. The repetition of vomit and the aggressive, hyperbolic question about eating fresh feces shows a genuine, almost physical revulsion. It's graphic for sure, but it serves a really important purpose in our analysis. It underscores that for some people, animals near food environments isn't just a minor pet peeve. It triggers a profound, uncompromising level of disgust related to sanitation and public health. Which brings us to a crucial realization. You like cats and dogs, but that doesn't mean everyone else does. This rant, once you strip away its anger and graphic language, reveals a stark polarization in consumer values regarding shared public spaces. We live in a deeply pet-centric culture right now, where animals are so often treated as family members. But this author acts as the voice for a demographic that feels entirely marginalized by this cultural shift. They are loudly reminding us that public spaces have to cater to a baseline of mutual agreement, and that automatically assuming everyone welcomes your pet is, at least in their eyes, a massive display of entitlement and selfishness.
What we're fundamentally dealing with here is aversion. It's not just a mild annoyance. It's a profound feeling of dislike, opposition, and repugnance. The source text explicitly concludes by stating that while pet owners may be incredibly devoted to their animals, there is a specific, established demographic that feels a deep and intense aversion to their presence in retail and food environments. This isn't just a preference, guys. It's an active antipathy. And when businesses design their policies, and honestly, more importantly, choose whether or not to actually enforce them, they're constantly walking this tightrope between the enthusiastic pet owner and the highly aversive customer. Pleasing one often inherently alienates the other.
Which brings us to the ultimate question the situation leaves us pondering. If a rule cannot or will not be enforced, does it actually exist? We've traced the anatomy of this complaint from a simple sign on a door to a complete breakdown of retail etiquette. We've seen how corporate apathy, employee conflict avoidance, and customer entitlement create this perfect storm of frustration. So, the next time you see a rule being blatantly ignored in a public space, ask yourself, is the policy just a decoration? And really, how long can a shared space function when the written rules and the actual reality are living in two completely different worlds? Thanks for joining me as we unpack this explainer, and I'll leave you to think on that.